and welcome to Connected episode 217. It's brought to you this week by Squarespace, Simple Contacts, and Luna Display. I'm your host, Stephen Hackett, and I'm joined, as always, by my two co-hosts. I have Federico Vitici.
Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Federico. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm in front of a 4K display for serious Mac users, but I'm not a serious Mac user, so I don't know what's going on. Something's off here.
Something's happened. We'll get to that, I think. And we're also joined by very serious Mac user and gaming PC enthusiast, Myke Hurley.
You can't do real gaming on a Macintosh. So I tweeted this a couple of days ago because we're gonna get into this big iPad stuff. But I was kind of just being, I was being a fool, and I tweeted, "You can't do real gaming on a Macintosh," and it was just really funny to see the replies because all I was doing, it's just the opposite of, you can't do real work on an iPad, right? It's the same argument.
Everybody knows that.
Although I would actually say that it is more true that you can't do real gaming on a Mac.
You're not wrong, but you were just like, you're not just stirring up the beehive. Like, you were just like full out, just like, I don't know, just like jumping in head first to the beehive. My analogies got mixed up. We should just move on to follow up because that happens at the beginning of the show.
I would hate to dive in head first into a beehive.
It wouldn't be very soft.
It's like one of the
some people do that for a living. Like
nobody does that. Nobody dives head first.
I think they do.
Who does that?
with the astronaut suit.
They don't go head first. What would be the point of that?
I think
how would that help anything?
Maybe because it's fun. I don't know.
I'm coming in.
I mean, like your job is to A, look after the bees, and B, get the honey. You do neither if you go head first.
You can take the plunge if you have protection. You know, that's my way of life.
Follow up. We have some follow up.
Why?
At some point over the last few weeks, we were talking about the number of Mac notebooks you can buy. And I think it was a question from Twitter about if this is the biggest number. And I thought, yes, it is. But turns out, no, it's not. So this comes from Ed Cormany. He is a buddy of mine. He hosts a podcast called Simple Beep. So if you like Apple history stuff, you should go check that out. There'll be a link in the show notes. It's a really fun show. And somehow I'm in their Slack for that podcast. There's like the two of them and then me.
That's
I'm not sure.
You are their Patronus. I met Ed at the New York Live show and told him how much you love their show.
Yeah, I do love their show very much. So go check it out. Anyways, so Ed pointed out that for a brief moment in 1995, Apple's PowerBook line was bonkers. So I'm just going to read these models.
I like best friends. It must be is just like the most Stephen Hackett follow up for briefly in 1995. It's like
I just want to be correct because we have listeners who they may be questioned on this at some point in their lives, and I don't want to lead them astray.
Just you and Ed. The only two people that one know or two care about this. But please fill everyone in.
All right. PowerBook 145B, the PowerBook 165, the PowerBook 230, the PowerBook 280, and then you get to the color models, the PowerBook 280C, the PowerBook 520C, and the PowerBook 540C. This is from a Wikipedia timeline of Mac models. So I'm assuming that it's correct. I didn't go and verify, but that is a mountain of computers. And so we talk about transitions in computing, like Intel and ARM. In the mid-90s, we were going from grayscale to color screens. Can you imagine what it must have felt like to get your first color screen on a computer? We're all too young to remember that, but it must have been mind-blowing. Right now, somewhere Dr. Drang is keeling over dead, thinking about how young we are.
Federico, which one of those was your favorite?
I mean, for sure, the 165. I have fond memories of the PowerBook 165, because it could only handle 165 files on the disk.
That's
why
it
was called like that. So you had to do, it was like it forced you to be sort of like a Zen, approach to computing. You can only have 165 files. So what you gonna choose? Like all your ClarisWorks documents. You had to be really picky about those because if you saved one, well, now it's 164. So Good times.
Oh, the number would go down like it started.
The number would go down, and when you reached 0, you had to return the computer because you were done.
You're finished. It's full up now. So what do you think is going to happen?
I can't put any more files in this thing. Please, please take it back.
Yeah, exactly.
We had also spoken about the performance of the MacBook Air, and I spent some time with one today. Not really enough time to like have any deep impressions, except that it's a really nice laptop, and I agree with what Jason said on Upgrade this week, that I think it's like the default Mac notebook now. Mac Rumors had put together a bunch of performance stuff on the new machines, and the MacBook Air is solidly in between the MacBook and the MacBook Pro. In some cases, very close to that MacBook Pro with 2 ports and no touch bar, the Escape model. Actually, very close to that in single core performance, which is pretty interesting. And then there's the Mac Mini, which the 6-core i7. this is so sad. I'm quoting, closely matches the 2013 Mac Pro models when it comes to multi-core performance, and exceeds them when it comes to single core performance. So, rest in peace, 2013 Mac Pro.
Can I just say about that Mac Mini? So Marco got a review in it. He did a really great video and written review, and he did a bunch of like interesting tests. Like they were tests that I could like fathom, because the Geekbench stuff, like I don't know what am I supposed to do with those numbers? Like, hooray, I can bench geeks. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that stuff.
Wow.
But like he did a bunch of like things that are broken down into seconds and minutes. And the Mac Mini is like surprisingly close to the iMac Pro. Like the 10-core iMac Pro. Like, I kind of cannot believe how much power that machine has. Like, that, it is pretty astounding, I think.
I forget where, I think Marco said it somewhere, or maybe Jason did. I have consumed a lot of stuff this week, but...
Yeah, it's been really good.
Yeah, someone smarter than me said, had this really interesting point, like the Mac Mini now defines like the entry-level Mac Pro. Like, the Mac Pro will be better than this machine, probably notably, which makes me excited about the Mac Pro.
Isn't that exciting, right? Like, how good is it going to be? I'm genuinely, like, really excited to see the Mac Pro now, because just how much of a beast is that thing going to be? It's going to be stellar. But what's so interesting is this, Apple said, well, the Mac Mini is for pros, and they didn't really share this side of it, I think, very well in the keynote. Like, they said how much faster than it was in the old one, but like that thing was 19 years old. Like, anything would be faster than that. So it's really exciting to see, at least if you spec it up and get an expensive one. Like, this is the i7. This is an expensive Mac Mini. This is faster than the one that is out for delivery at my house right now. But if you need something really powerful and small, like, the Mac Mini is a viable option. And I think that's pretty exciting. And like, yes, the GPU's not there, but if you need one, you can do Thunderbolt. And if you've thought about the Mac Mini before, you're like, oh yeah, it'd be nice to have one for this, like whatever this is in your life. Like Marco's test, it's like building Overcast and Xcode. Like, if you have that sort of job, the Mac Mini seems like an incredible option now. Like, you're going to pay for it, but I'm excited to see that they really did build, at least in custom ordering, a pro version of this thing. I would imagine that there are a lot of people that would have bought a laptop that can now buy a Mac Mini instead. Like people that were buying a laptop because it was cheaper and they had a display and they could just plug it in, right? Rather than going all in on like an iMac Pro or something. That could be something there to it, but it's a very impressive computer. And I think probably purposefully Apple didn't really bother to go into this. It's such a niche product that, it's probably the reason they gave it to someone like Marco, who can like tell the story as somebody who is the exact target market to the people that would be buying it, right? Like, I would expect that a vast majority of people that would buy that Mac Mini have read Marco's review. Like, it is, or at least would buy it right now, but like people that are going to buy it immediately, they're the people that are looking for that kind of content, because it is very much a niche computer. But I think that it's really exciting that they've given it way more than anybody would have expected.
they're going to sell the bulk of them this quarter, like no
Yes.
doubt. For me, I got one as a home server, but like I could do my work on a loaded Mac Mini. I would need an eGPU, but like it's a viable machine for someone even like me. Like I'm on the base model iMac Pro because according to these tests, like real world tests, like you said that Marco did, it's in the ballpark for, probably significantly less money depending on the display and eGPU you buy. So
Do you have
good
it?
times. No, it is out for delivery,
Okay.
so it'll probably be here this evening.
Okay.
I did see one in the store today. It looks cool in space gray, but that's all. That's all. I just saw it. So
Have I told you guys the setup that I'm gonna get for the Mac Mini?
Nope. But I don't want to know.
All right, so you don't want to know?
No, I do. Don't tell me. No, I want to know.
yeah, I thought you said I don't want to know. I was like, wow, that's
Don't tell
harsh.
me. Don't care. Get out of here, Max. Boo. No, I want to know.
So I'm getting the i7 6-core, 3.2 gigahertz, 16 gigs of RAM, internal SSD 256, because I'm also getting an external 1 terabyte SSD from Samsung, I think. I was checking out a bunch of reviews and it looked like a good one with support for USB 3.1.
Why do you want to go external for that amount? Just out of interest.
Because the internal storage, I feel like the Apple prices are insane for adding storage to with the built-in option.
Mm-hmm. So
I don't need to do any serious I'm not dealing with heavy PSD assets in Photoshop. This Mac Mini is mostly going to be used as a home server and for podcasting, and I want this to be my last Macintosh computer that I ever buy, because I really don't think that in 5 years I'm gonna be buying a Mac as we know it today, at least. The storage is mostly gonna be reserved for Plex and so TV shows, movies, that kind of stuff, and backups. So I think with USB-C, I can just get an external SSD and leave it plugged in and just use it to store media. Unless that's a bad idea, but I don't think it is.
no, as long as you're backing up that external drive.
Exactly.
Something.
So down the road, I think like maybe next month, I'm also gonna get like a second one, so that I should have like basically the Mac Mini, the external drive, and the backup for the drive. So I should be fine. Also, I don't keep a lot of important files on my computer. Everything is in Dropbox essentially. I already have, because I bought it today, I shared a picture on Twitter. I already have the ultra-fine 4K display from LG that I bought at the Apple Store with the new iPad Pro. And it's a very beautiful display. I don't love the design. I don't like the bezels. I don't like the LG logo staring at me. The stand is okay. I think I'm going to put the Mac Mini down there. Right now, there's a Triforce toy that I bought a few months ago. It's fine. I love the display. I don't love everything around it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I so wish that Apple would make a new new display, like a 5K display that, from Apple that is not an iMac. So just the display, but I didn't want to get the 5K LG because that was too big for my desk, and also it felt like it was going to be too compromising with the iPad Pro and the Mac Mini, because the 4K uses standard USB-C to output from a Mac and from an iPad now to the 4K display. The 5K uses Thunderbolt 3, but for some reason the iPad Pro does not support Thunderbolt 3, just USB-C. So I thought, it's a combination of the 4K is cheaper and it's smaller, so it fits my new desk better, and it also works with the Mac Mini and the iPad Pro, so it's going to be like an interchangeable setup. And also I'm trying to think ahead, like I'm convinced that the iPad Pro will eventually get trackpad support and so mouse support and better integration with external keyboards. So I'm preparing for a future where I can just have a monitor and a single cable, and then I can choose to use either a macOS computer or an iPad computer. So I'm preparing for that. And right now I'm staring at the new 4K display, but it's connected to Sylvia's MacBook Pro. She has a 2017 MacBook Pro. My Mac Mini, I think, should be here next week. Depends on when I put the order in and how long the wait is going to be.
This is all very exciting.
Yeah.
Federico buying a
The-
Mac.
My last Mac.
I think what might be better to say is it's probably your last Intel Mac, right? If and
Probably,
when they
yeah.
move to ARM, they might make something that again becomes interesting to you. You know?
Maybe we'll see. But yeah, Mac Mini is still not here, but the display is, and it's very nice. The display itself, the plastic sucks.
Yeah, it's they should do something. You know, that's funny. There's like some tweets floating around, like in the Mac Mini booklet. There's like a picture of a display, kind of like there's a picture of AirPower in the 10s Max.
Yes.
So that team it's the same team working on both of those products. But just make that one. That one looks really good. But you know, I guess we'll see next year with the Mac Pro. I assume that's when that'll all be one thing. So.
All right, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Squarespace. You can make your next move with Squarespace. They will let you easily create a website for your next idea or project. Squarespace give you the ability to grab a unique domain name, take advantage of and customize award-winning templates, integrate store functionality in your website if you want to sell something, but also they have every type of tool available for you to create the website you want to make. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform. There is nothing to install or patch or upgrade. They have got it all covered for you. Squarespace have plans that start at just $12 a month, and they all come with award-winning 24/7 customer support. So if you need any help, they will be there to help you out. Squarespace is super customizable. Everything is drag and drop, and they think about all of the little things so you don't have to. They integrate with a bunch of awesome services. You can integrate other services that you use elsewhere. You know, so for example, if you want to collect information from like a questionnaire on your website, you can integrate it with Google Sheets, so people can fill it all out in like on the web page, and everything's kind of native there. They press submit, and it will go into Google Sheets for you. All of these things can be very easily done. If you want to have like an email list sign up, you can integrate with a bunch of different email providers, you know, like MailChimp and companies like that. It's really, really awesome. So go try it out today. Go to squarespace.com/connected and you can start a trial. No credit card required. You can just sign up and try it out. Then when you decide to sign up for a plan, use the offer code CONNECTED at checkout and you'll get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain, and you'll be showing your support for this show. Once again, that's squarespace.com/connected and the code CONNECTED to get 10% off your first purchase. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of this show and Relay FM. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website.
All right, so the new iPad Pros are here. They're shipping today. They're in stores today, and I believe that all three of us have our hands on them. This is not a full review. We need some time to think, but I thought we could talk about at least our first impressions of maybe especially the hardware, because you know the iPad has been kind of the same recipe for really since the iPad Mini, with sort of the rounded edges, and they've been in that design language for a long time, and this one is a pretty drastic difference. And I'm excited to hear what you guys think. So, Myke, you have both of them. So maybe let's start with like the size comparison between the two compared to the old ones.
There is definitely a difference still that I can very clearly see. I think the impression that at least I had, and I think has kind of been the general consensus about these devices leading up to this, is that like with the 12.9 getting smaller and then the 11-inch screen, you know, now the 10.5 is an 11-inch, that they would be closer together. But the 12.9-inch screen is still way more screen than I want in certain circumstances. Like, if I'm reading in bed at night or whatever, I don't need a 13-inch screen to do that, and nor do I really want that. And the smaller screen is definitely better for that. And it's the same for when I travel. Like the bigger iPad Pro is significantly smaller than the previous one, but it's still noticeably bigger than the smaller one. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I feel like for me, I was wondering, I've been thinking like, oh, did I make a mistake? Because I got cellular on the smaller one, but Wi-Fi only on the bigger one, because that's how I've done it in the past, because the bigger one never leaves home. And I'm like, oh man, if I made a mistake, like, am I going to actually want cellular on the big one because I'm just going to use that one and maybe return the smaller one? I don't think that's going to happen. There is still enough of a difference to me, which kind of they still fit the purposes that I had for them. So that's kind of the screen size difference is it's still there, it is pretty much exactly now like a 13-inch MacBook Pro to a 15-inch MacBook Pro. Like those differences are very noticeable. Like you put those you put like two sizes of laptop next to each other, and you're like, okay, this is much bigger and it's heavier, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that still exists between these two iPads. So I assume that I will be living the multi-pad lifestyle for the foreseeable future. Like this is the 12.9. Like this is the iPad Pro for most people now. I believe. I think the 10.5 was before, but I now think that most people would benefit from the 12.9. It really, I cannot believe the screen to body ratio on it. It really is wild. It is wild.
Yeah, the fact that it's so much smaller than before, the 12.9, it really does make a difference. And I was comparing the I put the new iPad Pro on top of my old one today, and there's like at least 1 centimeter of difference on the bottom side, because the forehead and the chin have drastically been reduced. So I feel like if you're looking for, I think it's interesting to ask this question. If you've never owned an iPad Pro, so if you still have an iPad Air 2 or something, which one is the best for you? And so while I personally got a 12.9 with cellular, because this is going to be my main computer that I'm going to work on both at home and when I'm around, I think it's interesting to consider whether most people should do what you did and get cellular on the 11-inch. My main problem is that the 11-inch still doesn't show you two apps in the regular size class. When you do split view, it only shows you like the compact size class. So if that's a deal breaker for you, you're gonna want to do 12.9, I think. But also there's a question of, do you want to use this iPad when you're done working? Do you want to use it to read in bed or something, or to watch movies, for example? And I do think that in spite of the size reduction, I think it's still a little uncomfortable to read with the 12.9 inch, even in portrait mode, for example. So for me, the big problem of the limited split view on the 11-inch, that single problem convinced me that I was going to stick with the 12.9. If multitasking is not a big deal for you, I would recommend starting from the 11-inch, because I think it's more portable than the 12.9. Even though as a computer, the 12.9 I think is the better deal. I don't know if this makes sense, but basically if portability is still an issue for you, if it's really important for you to have a portable iPad, go for the 11-inch. If you want to have a computer replacement and you don't mind the extra, the extra size, basically, I love the 12.9. So
that thought process is exactly why there's a 12.9 on my desk. I had the 12.9 initially, and then I went to the 10.5 Pro, and I was telling y'all, going back to the smaller size, the iPad mostly became consumption device for me, because I really like the two full-size apps side by side. And when the 11 didn't get that, I knew that I was destined for the bigger one. Even though that does mean giving it up in some situations, I think that for me at least, like wanting to make a better run at doing more work on it, that the size is a big deal. And it's funny, went to the store, so I've seen both of them, and they definitely still they feel more different than I thought they would. I thought they would feel like, kind of, I don't know, maybe like the Max and the iPhone 10 or 10R. Like these are all really close. They do still feel distinctly different, but with the weight reduction, like I picked up the 11, I was like, holy cow, this is light. Mm-hmm. And I feel the same way about the 12 too. Now it's been a long time since I've owned a 12, but it sure seems like they've shaved some weight off of it, and that does make it more portable in its own way. Like you could walk around and hold this much easier, I think, than the old one, and that's a positive for some people.
Not in a bad way, but how weird did the flat edges feel? It's very weird.
Uh,
I like
do they
it.
Feel
No, but it's weird because it's very unlike any other
Other
like
iPad.
iOS device
Yeah.
that I've had in a very long time. It's like abnormal. I like it a lot. I like the look of it, and it's interesting. But like, yeah, it does feel kind of like nostalgic. Even it's kind of interesting.
It's a throwback.
It does feel like that, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wish that Apple would go this route across their devices. Like, I like the squared off sides. I think it looks really modern in a way that I wasn't expecting. I don't love the antenna lines. I went with the silver primarily because the antenna lines are lighter than the aluminum, and I felt like on the space gray it was not the best looking to my eye, at least. But I kind of dig it. It's got a presence to it that I sort of find interesting.
The antenna lines are so friggin' weird on the cellular model.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, not only does it go across the edge, also kind of on the top. Like it's like, what is going on with these things? I actually kind of, I think it looks pretty cool. Like I like that it's not being specifically trying to be hidden. I think it can look worse when they try and hide it. You kind of like call it out and make it look more like a design element. But they are freaky on the cellular. Like on the Wi-Fi, they don't have that little line that sticks out. It just goes across, but it doesn't. You know, you got like weirdly not in the middle on either of them. You've got like the two little notches that go from the line around the top of the screen. That doesn't exist.
It's a strange. They're strange looking. You know, there was a render or something of an iPhone 7 like years ago that is basically this design. Do you remember that? Like it had the antenna lines like this. And
Yeah.
The iPhone Pro.
That's right.
Yeah, iPhone Pro. Yeah.
You know, so they haven't really blended it in as nicely, but I like the silver. I especially like the silver with the contrast with the keyboard folio. I think that's sort of a nice look. But
Can we talk about that? Can we talk about that keyboard? Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. So I don't like it. I never liked the smart keyboard. Or I should say
You grew to dislike it, I think, because you found other things that you like more.
I grew to dislike the smart keyboard. And so after having used a bridge keyboard for almost a year now, it's very difficult for me to go back to the keyboard folio. And it's not the features that are new to the keyboard folio I kind of like. So I like that I was wrong at the hands-on area. It's very easy to put it into the case. It didn't seem easy. Maybe the demo person wasn't just familiar with it enough. I think it's fine. I like the laptop viewing angle. I think the desk mode angle is a lie. That is a steep angle that is not made for desks. I think Myke made an argument today in our iMessage conversation that this feels more like a movie mode. It's a media mode.
They're just calling it desk mode because like you can't get rid of the keyboard anymore like you used to be able to. I will say that like I have used it in that angle on a desk and it's like it works, but
you're gonna have some neck pain.
You got it far away from you, right? Like if it's not right in front of you. A funny thing, again, it's just super strange to me, but I guess it's just because of like the law of physics. The angles are different on each model.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They're both steeper on the 11 than they are on the 12.
Interesting. Okay. So, what is new to the keyboard folio? I don't hate. My main problem remains the keyboard. It's not a backlit keyboard. The keys are too small for me compared to the bridge keyboard, which uses like an old style MacBook keyboard type of setup. It doesn't. So the keyboard itself is very small, and it feels like my hands are constantly cramped into this keyboard. And also, it doesn't have any special media key or any special function key. So there's no Siri key, for example, which I get on the bridge keyboard. There are no media controls, which you used to get on MacBook Pro keyboards before the touch bar. Stuff to play and pause and change the volume and control the brightness of the display and the brightness of the keyboard. The Smart Keyboard Folio lacks all of these features. And so I'm gonna use this for now because it's my only option. But as soon as somebody or Bridge itself make a version of the keyboard that I want, an aluminum keyboard that I want for the iPad Pro, I'm gonna get it right away, because I can accept the Smart Keyboard Folio for now. It's an expensive thing to accept, but it's my only option. I should probably try again the Canopy by Studio Neat. I think it sort of works with the new iPad Pro, but I want an integrated setup. I want to have something that I can attach to my iPad and carry around. I don't want to have like a separate thing. So, unfortunately, I don't like it because I know where my preference is, and it's not this.
I was surprised at the texture of the outside. It's smoother.
It's smooth
than the previous one, and it's different to the texture on the keyboard, and the keyboard's texture is how the whole thing used to be.
Yes.
I have nothing to say about it. It's just, I was surprised by it.
And I think it's perfect for stickers. I think this thing is screaming for stickers.
I thought that exact thing. And yes, it is, because it is the most boring looking thing in the world.
It's just boring.
It doesn't
just
even
flat.
have an Apple logo on it, which I was super surprised about.
No, nothing. And I was going to say something. Oh, and it doesn't, I was surprised. I didn't ask about this, but the microfiber cloth inside to keep the iPad screen clean, it's gone. So I wonder what's going to happen in a few months with the keys that have been sitting on top of the display for a while. Probably nothing, because Apple thought about this. But I thought it was interesting that is gone, because it wraps around. So, of course, there's no microfiber anymore.
I do think it's harder to get it out. Like when I wanted to see it a second ago and look at the antenna lines. Like, you sort of have to, like, hold it, and it'll take some practice, I think. But the immediate thing I don't like is if you're on your finger on the left side to hit the sleep-wake button, the edge of the folio stands out a little bit from the edge of the iPad. And so, like, it's hard. Like, it's easy to basically push against the folio and not the button. Like, it just, something about that feels a little sloppy to me. But, you know, other than that, like, I think it looks nicer than the old Smart cover. I think it's like a more of a product in a way, like sort of more luxurious in a way that it's covered back and front. It's like a little iPad sandwich. But you know, I don't have the problems with the keyboard you do. I am going to like returning to the wider one, going down to the 10.5. The keyboard is a little cramped for me, and this is basically the width of the keyboard I use at my desk. So I'm hoping that there'll be very little adjustment period for me. But I understand why you don't like it, and I agree with you. Like, there should be more options from Apple on this. It's silly that there's just this one.
Or in general, there's none this time. Like, at least with the previous iPad Pros, Logitech have launched on like launch day with products, and it doesn't seem like that's the case. Yeah, like the Create and the Slim, like they were both available day one.
Yeah.
Or at least Logitech had information on day one about products, which they do not this time. I haven't seen it today. I'm going to their website again to see if I have since been wrong.
I wonder if that's about the new Smart Connector. If there's something there that they've got to.
Yeah, but you would assume that if Logitech were interested, or if Apple were interested, they would have just done the same deal they've done in the past. Like, if you remember, like Logitech had the Create out like before the iPad Pro ever, like they had that thing ready for day one of the iPad Pro. So the product had never been seen by anyone. They did a special deal with Apple, right, to get advanced information, right, to be able to build those cases.
And fun fact, this was 3 years ago. At my briefing for the first iPad Pro, Apple PR was giving out the Smart Keyboard and the Logitech Create keyboard.
And then, if you remember, there were no Smart Keyboards for a very, very long time from that period. Do you remember that? And like none in other languages?
Oh, yeah, it was only in one language. Yeah, I remember
but like they were just back-ordered badly.
Yeah. The original Logitech Create was terrible because it was an ugly piece of plastic with cheap buttons and stickers on top of buttons. So
the only good Create was the 9.7-inch Create. It's the only good Logitech keyboard.
Yeah, and they redid it for last year's iPad Pro maybe, and it was good again. But the first one was bad, really bad.
Yep,
it was a bad keyboard.
They did the one with the like keyboard that could detach. It was just a nightmare. It was very bad. The Apple Pencil is amazing. I love it. They gave me everything I wanted, by and large, like at least all the important stuff. The texture's nice to hold. It feels warm to touch now, rather than kind of like slippery and cold. It has a flat side, so it doesn't roll away. I've seen people saying, like, there was like, oh, it's actually a touch-sensitive area. It's not touch. It's not a touch-sensitive area. It's an accelerometer, because you can touch anywhere on the pencil, and it will change tools. You know what I'm talking about?
When you double tap.
Yeah, when you double tap on the pencil to change tools.
I think I read somewhere.
I read somewhere somebody said it was touch-sensitive, but that means the entire pencil's touch-sensitive?
No. I think maybe Panzerino on TechCrunch, maybe. There's a special sensor toward the lower end of the pencil that basically receives double tapping. I don't know. I don't think it's touch. I don't know if it's just an accelerometer though. I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna follow up on this.
Yeah, you know what? Actually,
It's like a band. It's like a band.
I'm trying it out, and like it seems like it is just down the bottom. So there's something going on in the bottom, but it's not like. Yeah. At least it doesn't seem in the way that I had read it. Like it's not like the flat side is a touch sensitive strip. Like there is no necessarily like touch sensitiveness about it, other than like something's going on, but you have to double tap it and you can tap it anywhere. That's probably a better way of putting it. But I am very pleased with this new Apple Pencil. I'm very excited about it. I love that it's always charging. I love that it's always there. I have noticed that like it is possible to attach it incorrectly. So because it's a magnet, right, you can kind of attach it to the left or to the right, and it will stick onto the top of the iPad, but it is not secure. So you kind of have to make sure you get it direct. You have to make sure it's in the middle, because otherwise it won't charge and it won't be a secure hold.
Oh yeah, you're right.
You know? So you can put it to the left, you can put it to the right, so like it's more kind of towards the edge, but then it's not secure. I don't think that's a problem, but like it's just something to be aware of. And I've already found myself using my Apple Pencil more again because it's more convenient to grab and it's always charged, which my Apple Pencil never is, because I would keep it attached to my iPad so the battery would drain away.
So something that I noticed, I agree with you completely. I'm already using it more. Something that I noticed though is that I kind of wish it was possible to also attach it to the shorter side of the iPad, because if I want to use the iPad Pro in portrait and hold it with my hands, it gets in the way of the pencil, and so the pencil detaches. And so I kind of wish that Apple made it so that you could attach it to the top side or the bottom side. I understand why they're not doing it, because the bottom side has the USB-C connector and the top side has they call it the top button actually in settings. And also there's the speakers on those sides. Still, I kind of wish that it was possible, because I want to hold my iPad in portrait and have the pencil attached at the top. I don't think that's a wild idea. I think it's, most people would expect that, but it's only one side with the magnetic connector. So, 4th generation iPad Pro, please make it possible to attach the pencil on any side of the iPad. Thank you.
You can stick it on the back if you don't have the keyboard cover on.
Would you trust that?
Yeah.
So, I feel like I want to look at it. Like I want to make sure that I see it. I want it to be at the top. I'm gonna stick it to the back. Actually, I didn't think about that.
If you don't have the keyboard cover on, it sticks to the back pretty well.
I should do that. But also, I want it to be at the
magnets.
top so I can look at it. I want to make sure it's there. Myke, let me ask you this: did you get the pencil engraved for you?
No, I wish I did. I wanted to. But I was concerned that having it engraved meant that I wouldn't get it on the first day.
All right, time to get a second one.
Well, I already have 2.
Multi-pencil life. Come on, have 3. 2 is 1 anyway, and 3 is 2. So
yeah, that's how it works. At some point, yes, and I will. If I do, I will get Myke was right on it, because that just seems like fun. It was Marco's idea. But look, I have so many other thoughts about this, but it's too much for today. But like Face ID is brilliant. It's super fast. I've barely tested USB-C. Like there's so much stuff. Like
so much more that we need to discuss.
You don't put your finger on the home button anymore, but oh boy, does it still love your fingerprint, this thing. Oh boy. Still a fingerprint magnet. I was hoping they would have fixed that. But I guess it's something, my assumption is it's something to do with the Apple Pencil, which just means that it picks up like that coating that they put on it.
Yeah.
But like, oh my God, this is the best. This is just like the best hardware.
So what we're going to do is we're going to keep testing this, of course. We're going to talk about it next week more in depth. Personally speaking, I don't think I will do a full review on Mac Stories because I don't want to keep people waiting for like 2 weeks. So my approach is probably going to be split it up in a series of articles, each about a different topic. So if you have questions about the iPad Pro, please send them to us. Or if you have questions specifically for me, please send them to me. I'm going to be testing a bunch of USB-C accessories because thankfully I've been spending a lot of money in the past year preparing for the USB-C revolution. So I have a bunch of things that I can already plug into the iPad Pro. So I'm going to test that, and we're going to follow up here on Connected, and we'll try and put together a series of posts on Mac Stories, starting this week with the first one, I think. So different approach this year, different setup, different approach. Should be fun.
All right, let's take a break. This episode is brought to you by Simple Contacts. I'm sure that you have a bunch of things that demand your time every day. Because you live in the modern world. You have work to do. You have side projects to get done with. You maybe have a video game that you've been trying to get to. But luckily, you don't have to worry about spending a bunch of time when it comes to renewing or ordering your contact lenses. Simple Contacts lets you renew your prescription and reorder your contacts online so you can do it from anywhere in minutes. They have a self-guided vision test that takes just 5 minutes to complete, which is so much faster than taking off time to go and wait in a doctor's waiting room. A licensed doctor reviews every single test that is taken, so you can skip the office visit, but not the care. I do want to let you know, this is not a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam. Simple Contacts is checking that your current prescription still helps you see 20/20, and they will renew your lenses based on that prescription. They don't write new prescriptions or examine eye health, but then every time that you need to get it renewed, it takes so much time out of the process. Stephen, I know that you've used Simple Contacts in the past too, right?
I have, yeah. And if, like you said, if all you need is contacts, open the app and walk your way through it, and then they're at your door. And if you're like me and don't necessarily like going places, talking to people, it's great. And they and I was impressed. They had the lenses I wear, which are a little bit of an unusual setup, but they had them and they showed up, and it was great.
So I want you to go right now and find out more about this, because Simple Contacts have all the brands and lens types that you're familiar with. Their vision tests cost just $20. The price of their contact lenses are unbeatable, and their standard shipping is free. Plus, on top of all of that, I have a special offer for you. You can join the other 5,000 people who have rated Simple Contacts 5 stars in the App Store, because their app's super great, and get $20 off your contacts by going to simplecontacts.com/connected20 and using the code connected20 at checkout. That is simplecontacts.com/connected20 and the code connected20. That's 20 connected20, and you will get $20 off. Our thanks to Simple Contacts for their support of this show and Relay FM.
All right, more topics. This list just never
it does end.
Never ends.
It does. It will eventually. It'll end, but not now.
22 pages down in Google Docs. So just because we are new to the iPad Pro doesn't mean everyone else is. There have been quite a few reviews out there. We've got some in the show notes, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the themes I think we've seen in this. I think there are a couple of pretty clear ideas that a lot of people have had around this, and I think a lot of it comes down to the conversation of hardware versus software. We talked about this last time, that this iPad Pro is ridiculous from a hardware perspective, but a lot of people seem to feel the way that I feel, at least, is that I'm not hamstrung by the hardware. It's iOS that I find limiting in some things that I want to do. So I thought we could talk about that, and I figured there's no better people on the whole planet to argue with me about this than the two of you, since you guys are iPad first. So
I would like to make an opening statement on behalf of me and Federico, because I know he's going to agree with me.
Okay.
But I feel like we need to just say it. We don't disagree with that premise. The idea that iOS 12 isn't where it should be. Like, we talk about this all the time, right? About what we would like to see in the next version of iOS. We spoke about it before iOS 12 came out. We've been speaking about it since iOS 11 came into the world, right? So there are definitely things that iOS is lacking. There are definitely things we believe and hope that iOS 13 will add. Like, 100% that is the case, right? Like, we agree with this premise. There is a problem, though, in about some of the ways that these arguments get framed and get twisted, that is then, for some reason, thrown back at me and Federico, and then we're just like, have to deal with being not professionals, and that we have to jump through hoops all the time. Like, these are the opinions that people have of what it's like to work on the iPad. So straight up, we agree with that sentiment, but there's a lot of nuance that is missed by people that don't use these devices to get their work done every single day.
I have an opening statement to bounce off of yours. That we're all in agreement with this, that at the end of the day, if it bothers you how someone else gets their work done, then like maybe you need to go for a walk, right? Like, this is not about, I think any three of us approach this as the iPad is going to come in and like take my Mac off my desk, and I'm going to show up, and Tim Cook will be like midway plugging in a USB-C cable to an iPad with like my iMac Pro and pieces on the floor. Like, people get defensive about this. Mac users get defensive about this, I think, in a way that is a little unbecoming and frankly like rooted in fear that their precious Mac is going to go away. And I don't believe that. Like, in the long term, maybe, but anytime soon, any time of time frame that makes sense to talk about, the Mac is not going anywhere. Apple wouldn't be making the investments they are now into it if that was the plan. Now, long term, maybe that's a different topic, but we can argue about things that are going to happen, 10, 15, 20 years from now, or we can talk about where we are today. And I think that's what we want to do.
Yeah, the iPad isn't killing the Mac. If anything, it's the iPhone, because it's iOS, right? And iOS is led by the iPhone, and the strategic advantages of iOS Apple feels them in the iPhone primarily. Like, if there is a big change coming, it is because the iPhone is so successful, not because the iPad is so successessful. Like, that's why if they're going to make any change, that's why they're going to make it. It's got nothing to do with iPad versus Mac. It's the impact that the iPhone has had on Apple has changed them as a company, and that's kind of why we're where we are, or where we could end up being.
Yeah, and so again, like, I think in this conversation, it is about how y'all get our work done. It's that is not a broader statement. It doesn't necessarily have to be a broader statement on the way the whole world works, or the way the whole world should work. But people get excited on Twitter and get upset, and I think that's just I think that's silly. We can have a conversation about this without getting into that side of things, which I think is what the three of us want.
Mm-hmm. So you guys had opening statements. I just have statements, or I just want to have a discussion about. Now, I just want to get serious for like 5 minutes, if you let me, and have a discussion about the idea of iOS being limited. Because I think it's fascinating to observe how this discussion is sort of generated in this corner of the media industry, and how it sort of relates to my experience, my personal experience, but also to the experiences of people that I've talked to and also use iPads. And I think, like, the more I read these reviews and the more I see these conversations on Twitter on what makes a computer or not, or the problems of iOS, I think it's pretty clear to me that iOS has limitations when it's compared to macOS. I think that's obvious. I also think, though, that there's this sort of odd tension between people who have grown up with iOS. So if you bought an original iPad and you were 10, you probably use your iPad for games or simple stuff. Now you're 18, you're basically a young adult, and you're off to college probably. So you've grown up with iOS and you're familiar with iOS. Or maybe you're someone like me who grew up with a traditional Windows computer, then moved to a Mac, then moved to an iPad. And so over the past almost a decade, 8 to 9 years in next April, you are familiar with iOS at this point, and you are familiar with the limitations of iOS. And there's that tension between these types of people and people who are still using computers, are still using laptops and desktops, and they want iOS to work like their existing computer. They most of the day they use a laptop, they use a MacBook, they use a PC, and then when they try an iPad, maybe because they have a review unit or maybe because they're just curious, they get upset. And I get that, and I understand why. But if we follow this argument, imagine me, for example. I could make the same argument for macOS. After so many years spent using the iPad, when I use my Mac, and take that from somebody who's buying a new Mac Mini, an expensive one, because I need it. But when I use my Mac, I'm annoyed by the fact that I cannot touch the screen. I'm annoyed by the fact that it doesn't have the apps I want. It doesn't have, the same quality iOS apps that I'm used to on my iPad. It doesn't have shortcuts, for example. It's got Automator, which is so much worse. It doesn't... I'm sorry, just my opinion.
Sick burn and carry on.
It doesn't... My MacBook doesn't have a cellular connection. I cannot hold the computer in my hands and walk around to read a book or read an article. And these are just some of the differences. So I think it's important to consider that those problems presented by the people who are trying to switch from Mac to iOS are valid, but also the opposite perspective is valid, that I'm used to iOS, and when I try something else, I'm annoyed because it doesn't behave like the TouchOS that I'm used to. And so I think it's interesting to have this discussion, but in a slightly different way. So rather than just saying, is iOS too simple or is iOS too limiting, which I think it's a generic statement that really doesn't nail the problem. I think it would be more useful to have this different question. Is the iPad a limited computer for switchers, for people who want to switch from a traditional computer environment to iOS, to an iPad Pro? And in this case, if we follow this slightly more nuanced question, I can see the problems, right? I can see the problems that iOS is facing, that the iPad is facing compared to a computer. It's a bunch of small things and it's a bunch of big things. Small things like, easily renaming a file before sharing it, which you can only do in the Files app or in a third-party app, which is insane.
Or even more than just that, like I have a file in Slack and I want to email it. Well, first I have to save it to a cloud service.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's insane that you still cannot natively create zip archives on iOS. You need to use a third-party app for that. Keyboard shortcuts that are inconsistent, but these are small things. There's also bigger problems, like the Files app is a very limited file manager compared to the Finder, or there's no concept of windowing and opening multiple tabs for the same app. There's no trackpad support, so you can use an iPad with a third-party keyboard, but you cannot use it with a third-party mouse or trackpad, which I think it's pretty problematic at this point. And of course, mobile Safari still doesn't work well with a bunch of websites, or you cannot watch 4K content on YouTube because Apple doesn't want to adopt VP9. And of course, despite the iPad having a USB-C connector now, you cannot use a USB drive and browse your files in the app called Files made by Apple. So I think it's interesting to imagine whether Apple is facing this very problem of being unable to choose if they want to please the iOS generation more. So the people who grew up with multi-touch, who are used to multi-touch and don't want to have any extra complications. Like they don't want their iPads to be as complicated as a PC. Or do they want to please the people who are using a PC and want to switch to iPads? This is like this fork in the road for Apple, I think, is what's going to be interesting to consider. Next year, with Marzipan, for example, and the path of the Mac and the path of the iPad, this collision of these two generations of people, I think will be interesting. And then there's a second question, if you give me 5 more minutes, that I want to touch upon. So after the question of, is iOS too limiting? The question of, can no professionals use iPads? And that is even more interesting for me because what is a professional? I saw this tweet from Nilay Patel of The Verge, who wrote an excellent review of the iPad Pro from the perspective of someone who doesn't really use an iPad Pro on a daily basis. He says, this is not this is not sarcasm. I totally get Nilay's criticism, and we need more of this type of reviews. He said that the Verge review of the iPad Pro couldn't have been made on an iPad Pro because of photographers, video editors, and a bunch of issues that the Verge team ran into when trying to get the work done on an iPad Pro. And I think that's totally valid, but also it captures perfectly the current state of our discussion about computers and iPad Pros and iOS. On one hand, you got the media. You have journalists, you have bloggers, you have video editors writing for websites, writing for blogs, for big publications, and they have workflows that have been built over the years. They have CMSs that have been designed on desktop computers. They require a PC. And those are, again, totally fine arguments, totally real problems. But on the other, you have professionals who actually use iPads, who actually use the iPad Pro. In the past year, since I started talking to people who, in a section of our Club Mac Stories newsletter called iPads Around the World, I set out to discover the ways that people use iPads. And I heard from doctors. I heard from a doctor who operates in the Australian outback and runs her business on an iPad Pro. I heard from engineers. I heard from illustrators. I heard from pastors and church groups. I heard from scientists who use the iPad Pro for lab reports and 3D graphics. I heard from pilots who use an iPad Pro for, what's it called? The flight maps. Used to be this thick books, very heavy book, and now it's on an iPad Pro. I heard from someone who oversees the marketing for Broadway productions such as Hamilton. It's wild the way that these different people from different parts of the world, from with different jobs, real professionals, are actually using the iPad Pro. These people don't work in the media. You don't hear from these people. These are the silent iPad audience, the silent iPad users that actually do get the work done, really important work done, and you don't hear from them. So this is the state of our discussion, is that what makes the iPad Pro a professional tool, this question, this problem is being raised by professionals who work in media and often don't have the kind of perspective of, a doctor or an engineer or a pilot. And while I'm not saying that Nilay Patel should know all of these people, right? That's impossible because I didn't know them either. I think it's important, though, to keep an open mind when saying the iPad Pro is not a computer or the iPad Pro is not a professional tool. I think it's important to keep an open mind and say, well, maybe there's someone who's actually using it as such. So that's how I feel like I would like these publications to be more open to that idea. And finally, I think that we can all agree on the fact that there are objective problems, objective issues that Apple should fix. We mentioned them many times on the show. Most importantly, I think Apple should incentivize developers to actually make pro apps, to make not just the iPad companions, but actually real versions of desktop apps on the iPad. There's a whole list of things, right? Like Apple should make their own pro apps. They should open up USB drive access. They should offer third-party backup APIs to to make actual like stuff like backplace, for example, on an iPad Pro. There's a whole list of things, but most importantly, I think this whole discussion, while there are objective problems, there are also people who are actually using the iPad Pro as a professional tool. We don't hear from them. So all we can do, I think, is try to keep an open mind, recognize the problems, point out the problems, offer criticism because that's important, but also try and not discount the iPad as a toy, because you wouldn't, people who work in Broadway, doctors and pilots, I don't think they see it as a toy. That's my series of statements. Thank you.
So I think one of the things that is interesting and important to add as a point to that, where you're like, we don't see these people, so we shouldn't write it off. I can understand how things could be written off if this was a completely absurd idea, right? Like, I'm sure there are professionals that use Palm Pilots today, right? I was in the airport a couple of days ago and they were using a dot matrix printer to print something, right? Like, there are professionals still doing stuff, but that is absurd, right? That dot matrix printers are still being used in nearly 2020 is where we're at, right? But so, like, there are professionals everywhere that use all types of weird edge case technology. But I think that we shouldn't. I just don't think that anybody, especially who works in and around technology, should be of the assumption that somebody could not get their work done on a powerful device like this. Like, yes, there are issues, but like, how many people's work, a significant portion of their work, is dealing with email? Like, you think you can't deal with all of your email and it's like general communication amongst coworkers on an iPad? Like, and that is a perfectly valid thing to use this device for. And depending on the type of job that you're in, it may take up a massive part of your time. Like, over 50% of my responsibilities, like individual responsibilities, way over 50% of those are conducted on iOS. When it comes to actually time spent at computing devices, I probably spend more time in front of a Mac, because the uninterrupted time of recording and editing podcasts is longer time, but individual jobs, roles, and responsibilities, I do more of those in front of my iPad, as well as all of my just socializing time, right? Browsing Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So it ends up being that I spend more time in front of my iPad, but it's not all work, is what I'm trying to say, right? So, like, and that's because the type of work that I'm doing is like communications work, is kind of been how I've been thinking about it, or research. And this device is perfect for that. In some cases, it's better because the app support is better and they're more new and it's more modern, right? And so this is just the thing. It's like, it's not an absurd thing to assume that people were doing this, which just surprises me that people get so, like, I just see these tweets that are so like fixed in statement, where it's like, professionals can't use the iPad. Like, yeah. All right, like, maybe you can't in your job, and that's totally fine, right? But yeah. Like, that's fine, but let's not be so presumptuous, especially when if you listen to podcasts, you know that there are people that do it because you hear us. Like, if you listen to this show, you can't say no professionals are using iPads, because I think you must have paid attention before.
I think some people, honestly, still believe that folks like you and I, we use the iPad to prove a point, and if you think that,
like, what's the point that we're trying to prove?
I think there's some people that seriously still believe that.
Yeah, like, we made a decision and now we can't get out of it, kind of thing.
Nobody's forcing me to use an iPad. No. Again, I'm buying a Mac Mini, so
we both use
I have
Macs
options
for important parts of our jobs, right?
Also, if I wanted to prove a point, I'm pretty sure the 5 years I would have proven my point. So that's enough time.
I'm gonna hobble my entire workflow just to own some jerk on Twitter. Like, it's ridiculous.
Also, I'm not sure how I feel about this sentence that I've seen in many reviews. Uh-oh. It's still an iPad. Okay, that's exactly what I want. Like, for some people, the iPad still being an iPad is an important factor. There's people who, if the iPad were to turn into a MacBook, that would be a problem. So I understand why that expression was used in many, many reviews for these iPad Pros. I think it's important, again, keep an open mind. I try to consider the different perspective of someone saying, I want it to still be an iPad and not turn into a PC. Like, I want it to be a screen that I can attach and detach from a keyboard. I want it to, have a SIM and cellular and all of these things. I don't want it to have a desktop OS on it. I want it to run iOS. So, I would have liked to see more reviews from, and I'm not saying this because I didn't have review.
All right, let me say it then because I tweeted it, and I tweeted it because I felt like I just had to say it because you weren't saying it. I don't know why Apple think that their best PR strategy is to not put this device in the hands of people that admittedly use them every single day. Mm-hmm. Because if you do not use an iPad to get your work done every day, of course, if you use it for 4 days, you are not going to find it a satisfactory experience, right?
No, not at all.
If you use a Mac to do whatever, if you have like a CMS which does not play well with iOS, like, you are not going to be happy. It's why when we make changes to our CMS at Relay FM, one of the top points is it has to work on iOS because I need to use it, right? Like, we have like drag and drop stuff on our CMS.
Steven is laughing.
Right? We have like the links that you see, they're added by this cool bookmarklet. I can drag and drop them in a web browser because we need that, because otherwise I would be very upset, right? So, like,
add them in the order you want. No errors.
Yeah. So, I understand, but it seems very perplexing to me that there are people that have relationships with PR at Apple, like Federico, like Jason Snell, who admittedly use iPads every single day, but neither Federico or Jason Snell got embargoed review units to write a review on day one when the reviews came out. And that is really weird to me because it puts the perception out into the world, because every review, except for John Gruber's that I read the same. And they all made that point, which again, very valid point. But that's not a mix. Like, I really enjoyed John Gruber's review because he just didn't talk about this. All right. And my assumption would be because he knows how he feels. He knows that everybody that reads his site knows how he feels. He doesn't use iOS for work. He might write on it, but he uses a Mac. He is a Mac lover. But he spoke about, and I loved his angle of just like, this machine is obsessively powerful. Like, way more than it needs, way more than it's gonna need, but it just is, because this is Apple kind of proving a point and showing what they can do when they make the silicon, and comparing that back to all the Macs that were released. Really interesting. And it was refreshing because it was different, because the rest of them all focused heavily, and all the headlines were written, like all of the headlines just was some variation of, yeah, but it's still not good enough, right? Like, because I can't make Google Chrome my default web browser. Like, I would love Google Chrome to be my default web browser, but it's not my residing point about what using iOS is like. So,
and the idea that I've seen some people on Twitter say, well, they haven't given, this is a ridiculous argument, they haven't given iPad Pros to iPad enthusiasts. I always see like some shade of irony in that word, enthusiast. But let's just use it
because you're an enthusiast blogger, right? That's your problem. You just that word brings up bad memories for Federico
I'm constantly
Battici.
cheering and clapping my hands. iPads. I don't do that. This argument that Apple hasn't given review units to enthusiasts because those people would have bought an iPad Pro anyway, and instead Apple wanted fair criticism from people who don't use
you
iPads.
Wouldn't give Jason Snell a Mac Mini for review either, would you, under that logic?
This would be like if you were like a Hollywood company giving advanced screenings of your new movie to people who are gonna hate your new movie and are gonna review the movie and give it like 1 star, it doesn't make any sense.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what a PR strategy is, right? Like a PR strategy is to get the best thing said about your product. And it's like Rick Allen said in the chat room, the exact same thing. They gave Marco the Mac Mini, right? Because they knew that they knew they had made a machine that he would like, right? Like, and they were right. He likes that machine very much. You may note they did not give him a MacBook Air.
Yeah, but you know, Apple PR works in mysterious ways sometimes, and it's totally fine. Like I get it. Sometimes you get advanced access, sometimes you don't, and it's okay. Because ultimately, I work for my readers. I don't work for Apple PR. So I bought an iPad Pro.
I would actually say that for you, it kind of doesn't matter in the sense of like the traffic to your website, because whenever you write an article about this iPad, it's going to get as much attention whether it was then or now. Like I genuinely believe that, because people want to know what you have to say, because it's always going to be different. I personally feel as well, I prefer to read the non-embargoed Federico Viticci articles, because you have the amount of time that you want to think through everything rather than just writing a lot of what other people can write, which is like, here is what this device is, like here are the specifications, because there's only so much you can do in 3 days.
I was reminded of how the original Macintosh was reviewed. So I found this like roundup post on Fortune.
How would you remember that? Sorry.
Yeah,
I was reminded. How were you reminded?
I have come across them before. I was not around.
Okay.
And like, I remember the one because Dvorak like made fun of the mouse, and it looks like a big goofball in hindsight. But if you read through these, and granted, this is like clipped to like find the most egregious things, there were complaints that Apple didn't understand what people wanted, or that Apple was forcing a vision on people and they wouldn't be able to do real work on it. I mean, the Mac was considered a toy by large numbers of like people in the computing community in the 80s, because like it had a mouse and a user interface, right? Like, where's the command line? This is not a real computer. And we see how eventually everything became like the Mac, right? Like when Microsoft moved from MS-DOS to Windows, and the world now, you know, for a long time has run on computers with user interfaces. I think there are strong parallels to the iPad, right? People who, yes, like to your point, there are people that the iPad is not for, because the iPad hasn't reach certain milestones that they need, right? Look at something like app development. Like if you're an iOS developer, you can't do that sort of work on your iPad. Maybe one day that'll change. That was actually true of the Mac as well. To write Mac software, you had to have a Lisa. I was like, not a great look. But the point is that we are still, even though we're 8 years in, we are still in the first era, maybe starting to see the second era with like iOS 10, 11 and the multitasking stuff, but we are in the beginning days of this platform still. And that means that there are people that it works for, and there are people that it doesn't work for yet. And as time moves forward, the number of people, the types of things these devices can do will only expand. Now, we can have a conversation about the rate of expansion. I think the three of us agree that Apple needs to move more aggressively here, especially when the hardware is so far ahead of the software.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is just how products evolve. You know, nothing in the world of technology is birthed fully formed, right? Like the original iPhone was a joke compared to what the iPhone 4 could do. And again, that was hardware and software. And the iPad is on that same track, again, moving probably too slowly, but in saying that you can't do your work on an iPad, that may be totally true and legitimate in someone else's life, but by saying that no one can do it, you're projecting your situation onto other people. And the truth is, there are people who could do their work on a Macintosh in 1985, right? And it actually started with people doing the types of things that the two of you do on your iPad every day, right? Like, yes, you weren't doing development. Yes, you weren't doing crazy video production like The Verge needs for their reviews. But like sort of lower hanging fruit tasks, like the iPad was really good at in the beginning, and then you slowly work up that chain to more and more complex things. And people just want to compare the Mac platform, which is 34 years old, to the iPad platform that's 8, that's an unfair comparison. And anytime you draw that line that way, the iPad will always come up short because it hasn't had the time to mature. And I think that historic context is important when talking about platforms. It's one thing to talk about, it has a USB-C port or it's Lightning. What does that mean? But we're talking about platforms. We're talking about what this thing is in the world. You have to have that context because the iPad does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in a world with PCs and Macs and iPhones and all these other things. And as it finds its ground, you have to remember that takes time, and pouring cold water on it too early, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're going to look like Dvorak saying that the mouse was a joke, and we all know how that turned out.
That's very good. Thank you for that, because like that historical context is refreshing and like consoling to me. Honestly, it's like soothing my soul. Like that there are other people that have been through this before me in the Apple ecosystem. But I wanted to share one last thing, which I found very interesting. As I mentioned, I shared a thought on Twitter that like I agreed with the criticism, but felt like Apple had done a disservice to the product basically by not giving these devices to people that use them every day to review them. And I had there was lots of replies I got to this, and there were lots of different opinions, but there were a couple of things that I was seeing were happening an awful lot, which I just found really interesting. So like, as well as the usual arguments, right, of iPads not being for professionals, the people that like want to take the iPad hostage and be like, I will not do anything until I want to buy one, but I refuse to buy one until Apple updates iOS, right? Like this, okay, like I agree with that, but like it's fine. Like we don't all need to know, but like whatever. But there was a common argument which was being levied at me. People were demanding of me to tell them why this iPad Pro was a meaningful update. They wanted to know what features were new. They demanded to know what could be done on this iPad that couldn't be done on previous iPads, and that I had to basically prove this is the only reason for why anyone would want to buy this device. And I found this really interesting because this is not an argument that I ever see for any other product. Like, when I talk about the iPhone, I do not have people saying to me, what can you do on this iPhone that you couldn't do on any other iPhone? Like, it is only worth it if there is something new that you can do. And I find that so interesting. And I wonder where it's coming from. I wonder why it's happening. Like, there's always requirements for people that they want to try and justify a purchase. I get that. But I never see this type of thing. Like, for example, the MacBook Air or the Mac Mini. Like, you can't do anything new on those devices. You can do some things faster. You can do some things more efficiently. But the Mac Mini doesn't do anything that the old Mac Mini couldn't also do. But we're not saying that you must justify what is new that can be accomplished via this Mac Mini for it to be a worthy purchase. And I found that kind of fascinating. That this was like, you can go to the tweet and you can look through the replies. Like, I'm not blowing this out of proportion. This was a lot of people were asking me this question or a version of this question. I will put it in our show notes for you so you can see it. But it was very interesting to me because I was wondering, I've never seen something like this before, and I couldn't really work out where this idea was coming from.
I wonder if it's a combination of two things. The price increase, which we talked about last week, but also the issue of iPad hardware advancing at a different pace than software. So you get the beautiful new hardware, but the software is the old one. And maybe that creates this annoyance in people of, well, I'm spending more money on a thing that runs old software, if that makes sense.
Yep, I agree with that. But again, like, I feel like that there are, like, so all of the Macs that have been released are in this exact same boat. They're all more expensive.
Yeah.
And they all have the same version of macOS Mojave that's been out for a bit. Like
maybe.
the iPhones are the same because iOS, the version of iOS is out, like on. So like, what do you want me to tell you? What, Memoji? Like that's a thing, right? Like, what do you want from me? Like
people get worked up about the iPad. Always have,
Yeah.
and probably always will be.
They always will. Yeah. And I think we know the reasons for that, right? Like, there are people that just think it's stupid. There are people that think that it's killing what they love. It's like this war of ideology, and it comes out in many different ways.
I've been through these waves of iPad excitement and iPad criticism since 2012. That's when I started seriously considering the iPad, and in 2013 I switched. And it's probably, I think, a couple years more than you, Myke. And I've seen it all. On each iPad announcement, there's the excitement of folks who really like the iPad, followed by a couple of weeks of this type of criticism, and then it quiets down, and who works on the iPad keeps working on the iPad. And every few months, the argument reappears that the iPad is not a computer because somebody writes a blog post and everybody starts to pile on. You know how it works in the Apple community, right? Somebody writes something and suddenly it becomes a thing to discuss. So this will be over again in a couple of weeks, and I want to see what Apple does to iOS 12.2 and 12.3. I do believe that some features like USB drive access shouldn't wait until iOS 13. It totally can be a point update. It should be a point update. Just make it a destination in files. That's all people want. And it's something that Apple can do at a system level. They don't need to work with developers. It can happen. So I want to see what happens in terms of updates. But we've been through this before. It'll be over soon. It'll spark up again soon also. But ultimately, we just got to have an honest conversation about what Apple needs to do on iOS. Keep an open mind that some folks like working on a Mac, some folks like working on an iPad, and we'll be fine. So that's my guiding light, if it helps. I've seen it before, it'll happen again, but don't worry, it's going to be okay.
I want to talk about something now that bridges the Mac and the iPad, and that is Luna Display, one of our final sponsor for this week's episode. If you have a Mac and you have an iPad, there is something missing in your setup, and that is Luna Display. This is something that could change the way that you interact with your devices, something that you'll be so excited to have in your life. That is Luna Display. Luna have given us maybe a little taste of the future because they give you the ability to use your iPad as a wireless display for your Mac that can also be interacted with touch. You heard me right. The iPad and the Mac that you already own working harmoniously together. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that useful? You can connect over Wi-Fi or USB. Boom. More screen real estate. Just plug in a little piece of hardware into your Mac and you are good to go. And that is what Luna Display is all about. It's wonderful. This means you can have multiple screens even when you travel. So you got your laptop, right? But you can have your iPad with you as well. That's 2 screens. You don't have to lug around an extra monitor. I mean, that's like, who would want to take an extra monitor in like a backpack, I got my laptop, I'm on the train, let's get the monitor out. No, we don't want to do that. But you can use your MacBook, you can use your iPad together perfectly. And don't just take my word from it. Luna has been reviewed greatly everywhere. TechCrunch described the visual fidelity as frankly stunning. Apple Insider said it is the first time a wireless solution like this has impressed them. I know that you're going to want to go and check these things out. So go to lunadisplay.com. That is LUNADISPLAY.com. lunadisplay.com. Once you're there, use the promo code CONNECTED at checkout and you'll get 10% off. That is lunadisplay.com and the promo code CONNECTED at checkout. Our thanks to Luna Display for their support of this show and Relay FM. So, Stephen, can we just talk about CarPlay or something? Can we just do that now?
I do want to talk about CarPlay.
Thank you.
Because I had a lot of questions about this. So I recently bought a pickup truck, which I just want to gloss over with the two of you.
Yeah.
But that's all we need to say about that. And it's a Toyota, and they had Toyota's entertainment, center screen in it. They call it Intune, I believe. And to call it a dumpster fire is being generous to actual dumpsters that are on fire. It's just really bad. It has this fun thing where if you would use Siri or if you got a phone call and music was playing, sometimes it would just reboot. It was like, oh no, too many things are going on. And then just your head unit would just restart while you're driving down the road, which is very concerning. And I just wasn't happy with it. And so I did a little research, and this particular truck, it's got a standard double DIN head unit, which means you can basically slot in another head unit, with a little bit of work. So I did some homework, and I ended up with we'll put a link to this in the show notes, but I ended up with the Sony XAV AX100, which is just rolls.
Oh, I know that one so well.
Rolls right off
That's the best one.
It's my favorite one, really.
Yeah.
It probably is, actually.
Why can't Sony name their products? Why do they
I don't
have
know.
such a problem with naming products?
You tell me. I bought the headphones. I don't know how to name these headphones. I don't know how to describe them to my friends. I just say I got the latest Sony USB-C headphones because their name is something ridiculous like MXAC something 3000. I don't know. It's just a bunch of numbers and letters. It's
Ridiculous. I will say, this is not a plug, it's just the site that I went to. Crutchfield, like if you're interested in doing this sort of stuff, you can plug in what car you have and what you want to do, and they this is the head unit, this is all the wiring you need. It was really easy. I just ordered everything from them. Actually, the head unit I got as an open box return at Best Buy because it was a bunch of money off, which was cool. But so I went with the Sony. It is a wired CarPlay unit. So CarPlay will work with wired, and there are a couple of options for wireless CarPlay. If you're doing this aftermarket like I did, you're going to pay twice as much for the wireless CarPlay. The reviews I read for the couple that were compatible with my vehicle, the reviews were pretty hit or miss for something you're going to spend $700 or $800 on.
Yeah, wired and wireless is like plugging the iPhone in to a cable that goes into the car somewhere, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a lightning cable. I have mine just, right by the gear shift, and it is, it's totally fine because I'm going to plug my phone in anyway to charge it. So wired CarPlay is totally fine. I didn't see the need to spend twice as much and then plug in my phone anyways to charge it. So yeah, so I have a USB cable, and here's a top tip. If you use a lightning cable in your car, the Apple ones, for whatever reason, I've always had them really fall apart in the car. I think it's because of the heat. And so I switched to the Amazon Basics one, has like a cloth wrapped lightning cable. And I've never had one of those fail in a car. They're great.
Because it wouldn't melt, right?
Mm-hmm. They got several colors. I got a gray one, whatever. It's fine. So I got to plug the phone in, and then CarPlay happens. The other thing that I heard a little bit about this unit is that it is a resistive touchscreen, so it's not capacitive.
No. Bad screen.
Get out.
One, what was in the truck was resistive, and two, it is by far, this particular head unit that I put in, by far the most responsive resistive touchscreen I've used. Again, you can find them with better screens, but again, you're going to pay a lot more.
Let me ask you real quick. I want to try and put this in context, right? What is the most responsive resistive touchscreen actually?
I mean, that's a low bar, but it's so the CarPlay and then the OS that's on the unit itself. There are several places you could scroll and not just tap buttons, and it's perfectly responsive. It's fine, and whatever, it's in a car.
Would you say it's better than a Nintendo DS?
I don't know if I have enough experience with a Nintendo DS to say.
Your kids have them.
No, they don't. They were iPads. You can't do
These
real
kids
gaming on a
today,
DS.
These kids today, they don't understand gaming consoles.
I think you once sent us a picture of your kids playing with a 3DS.
Mm-mm. Not my kids.
No?
We have a Wii, but no 3DS.
Oh, you have a... Well, isn't the Wii resistive?
No, we have the original Wii.
Oh no! Oh, not the you had the Wii. You didn't have the Wii U.
No one should have the Wii U.
Hey,
But some people do. Okay, so you don't.
Can't do real work on a Wii U. So it's fine. But the big reason I went with this unit,
can't do really anything on the Wii U. Never could. Junk. Sorry.
For Wii U. Federico and Myke have a game podcast called Remaster. You should go listen to for more Nintendo hot takes.
We don't dunk on the Wii U as much as we used to. We used to a lot, like a lot
Well,
before the Switch.
Kicking a man when he's down, right?
It was very bad. We developed this whole
bad.
like theory about how bad Nintendo's marketing team was. It was like a whole scene.
So the reason I went with this is because the Sony XAV-AX100 has a physical volume button, and 9 out of 10 aftermarket CarPlay head units do not come with a volume button. They have like a little slider, or you have to go into a menu, and I wanted just a physical volume button. I know that seems wild, but this one had it, and it had good reviews, and it was in the budget, so I went with it. I like having a physical volume button.
So do you not have like volume controls on your steering wheel?
I do. And so part of this is if you do one of these aftermarket, you have to be really careful. That's why I recommend going to someplace like Crutchfield, because they can walk you through. You need to do this wiring if you want your steering wheel controls to work. And in my Tacoma, the volume buttons on the steering wheel do work with the very elaborate wiring I had to do. But it's just nice to be able to just reach up and turn it down. So
Yep.
But if your car doesn't have volume buttons, then this is you're stuck with. And so I did install it myself. There are a couple Instagram pictures that I'm pretty proud of because it looks like the inside of my truck just sort of vomited all of its innards out, but it all works. And I like getting my hands dirty, and it's expensive to have this work done. I figured I got a couple hours on a Sunday afternoon, and I'll listen to a podcast and do a bunch of wiring in my driveway. So it all worked. But a couple of that first photo is a little scary looking if you get nervous around wires. Don't look at that first image.
Trigger warning for wires. Like it is very bad. It's just the insides of a car.
It's a lot of stuff, but it all works. It all buttoned up pretty nicely. And this is my first experience with CarPlay. The only other time I've even ever seen it is I think last year, John Voorhees picked me up at the airport in Chicago, and his car has CarPlay. And that's the only time I've ever seen it. Like John, I poked at his dashboard for a minute, and then he got annoyed that I was doing it and made me stop. But it's interesting. So the Sony and all these aftermarket ones, they have their own, I'm going to call it an operating system, where like it can do phone calls and Bluetooth and the backup camera. It has all of that sort of to itself. And CarPlay is like a mode that the unit goes into. So like you plug your phone in and a CarPlay button shows up on the screen, and you tap that, and then you're in CarPlay. Does that make sense?
Favorite, yeah, it does. My favorite, I was going to say, because I'm adding your photos to our show notes, I really find it funny that the finished picture is not actually in the CarPlay interface. I find that so funny. Like, why didn't you open the CarPlay interface?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why didn't you do that? I don't understand. It's like,
because I've been putting tiny
interface.
wires together for like 6 hours. I do have... Yeah, so we'll get to the CarPlay interface itself, but I really I like that image because it shows what I'm talking about. The CarPlay is just an app on this thing.
Yeah, it's there.
So I plug the phone in. iOS has a setting where you can change, if you can say, does my phone need to be unlocked or not? So my wife drove it the other night, and her iPhone 8, like, it wouldn't work, and so she had to unlock her phone first. So I turned that off on my XS Max. Like, it's when I plug it in to be done. There's hardly any settings for CarPlay itself. Basically, the only thing you get is what apps appear in what order. So there's a screenshot of this in the show notes where, CarPlay is really interesting to me, like, from a platform perspective, because Apple... like, you have to be allowed to write a CarPlay app, right? Like, you can't just do it. And you have to have all these special permissions. And so for me on my phone, just, with what I have installed on my phone, because I own a podcast company, I have a lot of podcast clients. So I was like, you can install 6 different podcast apps. But you can control what goes on the home screen and what order it's in. And so you can see how I have mine set up there with the only third-party apps are Google Maps and Overcast. And CarPlay is like, it's weird. It is an extension of what's on the phone. So like the closest analogy I could think of, and it's not a good one, so forgive me, but if you think about you're running Keynote and like you have your slides on your iPad or Mac screen, and then you have what's going on in the projector, right? And the Mac or iPad screen is controlling what's on the projector, right? I think that makes sense. CarPlay is kind of like that. So if I am using CarPlay to listen to Overcast. So I have, connected and this episode up on the screen. And I pull into my driveway. I put the truck in park. Everyone's safe. And I pick up my phone to open Slack. Overcast will disappear from the CarPlay screen and it will go back to the springboard. It'll just go back to that grid of icons. But if I went into messages on my phone, the messages UI would show up on CarPlay. So they're linked in a weird way. And in a way, I kind of like that because it's like if I pick up my phone when I shouldn't in my car, it's like a reminder because the app that I was listening to music or the navigation goes away. And so it's linked in a way and it kind of feels fragile at times, but it's an interesting relationship that I just wasn't aware of because, again, I had only really used this one time for like 10 minutes. So the phone and CarPlay are like linked in a way that is takes a little getting used to. But what's really nice about this is that your car suddenly becomes aware of what's happening on your phone. So you get an iMessage, you get a little banner on the CarPlay display, and if you tap it, you do not see the text. Like CarPlay will not ever show you what's being sent to you in iMessage, nor will it show you a keyboard to respond. It will read the message to you, and it will ask you if you want to reply, and then you can reply. It's all done by voice. So I had to run a microphone so it would hear me because the built-in system, like that microphone, doesn't work with anything else. So you have to run your own mic. And Siri can just read me my messages. And if I'm on the home screen, the messages icon gets a badge so I can see how many iMessages are there waiting for me, which is a nice touch. And it's actually like pretty seamless to deal with iMessage. In fact, there've been a couple times talking to y'all where like I've just had conversations with you when I'm stuck in traffic via Siri. And like, unless Siri just butchers what I say, you would probably never know. And I think that's a pretty nice feature and one that I've never had in a car before, because before this, I just had like a Bluetooth connection to stream audio. So it's nice to have that stuff, but it's really done in a way that's not distracting. Like if you don't deal with that banner, it just goes away on its own, and they're just there waiting for you when you want to deal with them. It's never super invasive into your driving experience, which is good.
So how do you find yourself like interacting with it all the time? Do you have to dictate everything to Siri? Like, and are you doing that, or are you kind of just like typically would you just get a message and leave it, or like are you finding yourself talking to Siri, and then when you do that, is it through the car or is it through the phone? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I am finding myself talking to Siri a lot more than I thought it would. And again, this is new. I've only had this in a couple weeks, so maybe I'm still in the honeymoon phase. But if I get a message from somebody, so like the other day, my dad and I were going back and forth, and I had to go run an errand. Like we just kept the conversation going when it was, convenient for me to do so. And for like maps and other stuff, you can use your voice to say, hey, I want to go here, but messages is by far the most interactive thing. Past that, I'm using Siri to play music. Most of the time, even or like with Overcast, I'm just doing it on the screen. One thing that's really annoying, and I don't know if this is CarPlay or if it's Overcast or if it's iOS 12 point whatever beta I'm on, but say that I've been playing Overcast just on my phone speakers in my kitchen. I walk out to my driveway and get in my truck, turn the key, plug the phone in, music will take over. Overcast will not resume automatically like it does over a Bluetooth connection, which I find infuriating because most of the time I just want to pick up the podcast I was just listening to. So then I'm going into Overcast and finding it. But Siri is definitely like the main interaction for me, at least, because there's actually kind of no other way to do it, right? Like there's no way to you can go through the menus of music and stuff, but if you want to deal with messages, it's all Siri. And again, that's through the microphone that I installed. It's up like on the A pillar by the windshield, and it hears me great. If I did some phone calls with it, and like it sounds great. And so the phone, like the whole time, the phone is just in the console off. Like the screen's off. It's not doing anything unless I pick it up. It is just acting as the brains of the whole operation.
I mean, are you surprised about any of this, or is it kind of working as you would expect it to work, or like require it to work? Like, are you finding yourself being like, "Oh, that's really nice," or is it kind of just like, "Yep, that's what it should"?
Yeah, I think it does what it should. I think it seems really solid. It does some clever things where like in music, on iOS you would you get the scrubber down the right hand side to like skip down to S for a band that starts with S or or like whatever letter you want without just like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So that doesn't necessarily translate well to these type of touchscreens, and so on CarPlay, if you do that, it pulls up a grid and you just tap the letter you want. So like they've adapted the UI in places where it makes sense. In fact, there's like a virtual home button on the screen to go back to the home screen, which is sort of funny because no new devices have home buttons. So like it's like this like visual like virtual representation of a thing that isn't really a thing anymore. But I would say it's pretty solid. It's weird that if you go to the home screen on your phone, CarPlay goes to its home screen. I wish there was some division of labor there, but other than that, I've been really happy with it, and I think it's definitely like way safer if I want to deal with messaging when I'm driving than picking up the phone, which is like a terrible, dangerous thing that you shouldn't do, but most of us are guilty of it. And this has definitely basically cut that out. Like I don't. Like even at stoplights, I have not like picked up my phone. Again, I know I shouldn't. Please don't badger me about that. But I know that people just do that. And
there is also an argument that you shouldn't even be dictating messages, right? Like that is
probably
an argument because it's like attention and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think about that. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting studies, but yeah. I haven't really got a point to that.
And I can use Google Maps everywhere, which is great.
I'm jealous. I really want to have CarPlay in my car, and just listening to you, it made me more jealous. So,
well, you know what you have to do?
There's nothing I can do.
Go to Crutchfield or whatever that is. And,
Nope. I'm not gonna have car vomit in my car.
Oh man, I tell you what. When your Mac Mini gets in,
not doing it. Mm-hmm.
Bring me out, and I'll set up your desk, feel nice and neat, and I'll do your car. We'll just have like a day of wires together.
You're like the Wire Man. Should be your new title. Stephen Hackett is the Wire Man. You know how they do like movie posters?
He gets pretty bad in season 4.
Wow. What happened in season 4? I started to like cable manage appliances or like things that shouldn't be cable managed.
Yeah, it all goes wrong. All of your characters get like just messed up at that point.
I will say,
redeemable point.
Connected audience, I will be 100% disappointed if by next week's episode there's not a poster of this.
The cable, the Wire Man.
I'm saying the Wire Man seems like a movie poster that someone should make. So slide into my DMs anytime. Is that it?
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah, I think so.
Are we done? A bunch of stuff this week. It was fun. We talked about Macs from 1995, and we talked about CarPlay, and then I sort of blacked out in the middle. So it's a good show. If you want to find links to the stuff we talked about, head over to relay.fm/connected/217. While you're there, you can get in touch with us via email, or you can do it. You can find us on where do we want to be found this week? Can we found on Instagram again?
Yeah, I published,
yes.
I put a link to this in the show notes. I was putting loads of stuff on my Instagram stories about me unboxing my 2 iPads, and I saved a story highlight of it so you can go and watch it. I don't know. It's fun, I think.
I also want to be discovered on Instagram with my real username, not John Borges. I'm actually BTG on Instagram
I forgot
too.
that you did that.
Yeah.
So it's still VITICCI there as well. I am not John Borges. He's a different person.
And so you can find Myke on Instagram as IMYKE, and you can find me there as Stephen M. Hackett for reasons.
Do not look up.
No, it's better. It's better now.
Oh,
it's better now. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know. They blocked me, so I don't know. So yeah, find us on Instagram, and you can find the show notes. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, Squarespace, Simple Contacts, and Luna Display for making this week's show possible. And I'm going to be out next week, but the two of you will be back. So until then, say goodbye, gentlemen.
Arrivederci.
Cheerio.
Adios.